Good afternoon. My name is Pat. I'm an alcoholic. I'm grateful to be sober. I'm grateful to be here. Judith, I want to thank you for asking me to participate in my recovery. And I was sitting here, and I watched my mom walk in the back room and sit next to that lady right there with the blonde hair and the glasses. And I heard them read step 7. And if you've heard my mom a lot lately, last couple of years, she really emphasized that prayer. And by no coincidence am I here today to talk about 6 and 7. But I'll tell you, when I first got it, I called my mom, like, man, I don't understand. And I called Carl, I'm like, I don't understand. I said, all these guys, you guys all have like lots of sobriety, and they give the newest guy step 6 and 7, you know. And Carl on the other side of the phone said, well, Judith called all of us, and none of us wanted 6 and 7, so the newcomer got it, you know. And yeah, so here I am, right? There's not much mechanics of step 6 and 7 in the big book. It's 2 paragraphs. You already read it. That's what the book says. But my experience of 6 and 7 has been an experiential process of a lot of pain, and which I'm going to get into, and it's not my favorite thing to talk about. Absolutely not. 6 and 7 operates around relationships in my life, which isn't always fun to talk about. And it's easier for me to do step 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. You know, 8 and 9, love those, great stories. 10, 11, 12, I love helping the newcomer. But 6 and 7, I'll avoid that for 8.5 years of sobriety until I'm at a point where I'm going to kill myself, which I'll get into. And first I'll identify, and my sobriety date's October 23rd, 2002. I have a sponsor. His name's Jonathan Clark. He lives in Boise, Idaho. And the greatest thing about that relationship is that man knows he's my sponsor. And I think if you have a sponsor, it's real important that they know. I mean, I walked around Alcoholics Anonymous for a long time with a sponsor, but not using him. And I can tell you why. My first sponsor, at a year of sobriety, I had about a year sober. I was at an AA meeting, and this guy came running up to me, a sponsee brother, and he said, oh my God, so-and-so, which was my sponsor, told me that you have experience in this. And it was my deepest, darkest secret. And it would have been totally fine if Spont said, hey, I got this guy that has this experience that you may have. Would you be willing, and allowed me the opportunity to be of service? But at the time, I was hit sideways, and I went into a place where I no longer trusted men, just like the little boy had never met his father. And today I understand the spiritual responsibility I have when I hear a 5th step. But I have a sponsor, and he knows, and I have a home group. My home group's called the South Coast Speakers Meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. We meet on a Wednesday in Laguna Beach at 8 p.m. If you're ever in the area, please come see us. And I'm so grateful for my home group. The history of my home group's first meeting was in February 1946. I clearly wasn't there, but the reason why I'm so grateful for that home group is when I walked up to that meeting, I was met by giants. I sit today amongst giants. The speakers I'm with tonight, I've looked up to my whole sobriety, and I walked in, and a man by the name of John Ackerland met me at the door. And he put out his hand. He had this thick accent. He said, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous, kid. I love you. And he absolutely reached in and touched my heart. I was not lovable when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. You'll hear my story. And what he did for me was he said, come with me, kid. And he took my hand. He pulled me into the middle of that group, and he sat me in the front 2 rows. And I sat next to guys like Lynn Wilder and Tommy Whalen and guys with 43, 50 years of sobriety. And I'd sit amongst these guys, and I'd be like vibrating, you know what I mean? And they'd put their hand on my leg, and they would say, just take a deep breath, kid. And I'd take a deep breath, and I'd be just kind of like antsy, you know what I mean? And I had to have to go to the bathroom, and they'd just hold my hand and say, we don't go to the bathroom during the meeting. We go before and we go after, and then the speaker would speak, and they would get done, and they would say, okay, go thank the speaker. And I was like, but I didn't like him. And they would say, we don't care if you like him or not, just go thank him. He drove all the way from LA, 3 hours in traffic to come share his life with you. And I would go thank the speaker, and And I remember one time I was in the meeting and the guy came to ask, we want you to read the 12 traditions. And I was like, I got to read the 12 traditions. And Johnny Ackerland says, no, he's not reading the 12 traditions. He doesn't have a buttoned-up shirt on, and I was sad I didn't get to read, but I didn't want to read anyways, you know what I mean? And so after the meeting, he said, next week, kid, I want you to wear a button-up shirt in case you're asked to do something in Alcoholics Anonymous. The next week, I showed up in a button-up shirt, and those guys taught me how to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. They spoon-fed me Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm so grateful that they taught me anytime I get behind the podium that I put a suit on. I don't dress like this normally, that's for sure, And they taught me the importance of getting into the history of the thing that was saving my life. I want to thank the speakers that spoke before me in AA 101, and I just have a love affair for Alcoholics Anonymous, and my first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, I was 11 months old. I didn't have a drinking problem, but my mom did, Just out of curiosity, how many parents have kids here? Because I've heard them kind of a lot. Thank you for bringing your kids to Alcoholics Anonymous. And because I was that kid, I was 11 months old. I grew up in AA, I run around the meetings, and I could recite chapter 5 when I was a kid. I could recite the 12 traditions. At the end of the meeting, I held hands. I'm like, keep coming back, The old timers are telling me, we're saving this seat right here for you, kid, you know what I mean? And I had no clue what that meant, you know what I mean? But I can tell you, there's my seat, and they knew, I didn't know. And the women in AA were like, he's so cute, can I have him for the weekend? And mom would be like, sure, go ahead, And my mom would fly to North Dakota to speak, and I'd be at some AA lady's house, And I met some of these women today, and they're like, oh my God, your mom let me have you when I had 7 days sober, I have a 12-year-old. He's not going home with any of you. You know what I mean? Not even the back row, right? You know what I mean? Jason was picking sides of the room. He ain't going home with any of you. You know what I mean? Because it's weird. Look at the person next to you. Here, meet Uncle Tom. He's going to teach you how to fish. You know what I mean? And Uncle Joe, he's going to teach, Lynn Wilder taught me how to play basketball. And I'm just weird and I'm awkward. I can tell you that I suffer from the spiritual malady of this disease long before I ever took my first drink. You know what I mean? I'm weird. I'm awkward. I'm like, you know what I mean? I'm just I'm that way naturally. I'm that way sitting there today. And I'm a right fielder on the baseball team. I don't know if there's any other right fielders here. Anyone going to admit it? One guy. Cliff, thanks, Cliff. One guy, you know what I mean? Right? Because we know it's the loser position, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? I throw the ball as hard as I can that way. It goes 5 feet that way, you know what I'm saying? And the coach is like, yeah, go out there, but the ball's never hit, And I'm in right field, you know what I mean? Somebody told me that if I found the long grass thing with the white things on there, if I blew them all off, I can have a wish, you know what I mean? A dandelion or something like that, I'm in left field, looking for the dandelion. The coach is yelling at me, the other side of the field, kid. I'm like, oh, okay. You know what I mean? I'm in left field, wishing for a different life, you know what I mean? And my mom usually sends me a text before I talk. It says, make sure you tell them the truth. And I keep looking at my phone all the way right here. And I didn't get the text. But I'm going to go on if my mom's sitting there like I saw her walk in the room. And the truth is that my mom's a blackout drinker. Which means I'll never know who my dad is, you know what I mean? For all I know, my dad could be the cable guy. It's like, bow, chicka, bow now, And, my mom didn't even know she was pregnant till she was in labor, which is kind of weird, you know what I mean? She thought she was constipated, so she called 911, right? Right, and if you're laughing, you identify with the thinking, you know what I mean? Because it makes total sense, Constipated, call 911, and she gave birth, you know what I mean? And after giving birth, the paramedics you need to name him. She's like, name what? Her name's Patty, so she named me Patrick so she wouldn't forget my name, you know what I mean? And the truth is, I'm supposed to be a turd, you know what I'm saying? And Grateful for the inventory process. Thank you for that talk, Done enough inventory to look at that, The inventory process has brought me back into humanness, Once a turd, now a human, But like I'm a right fielder, right? I'm weird, I'm awkward, I'm goofy. I remember being on the basketball team one time. I caught the ball, I was so excited because I never got it. Threw it in the hoop and we were on defense, you know what I mean? And I always strike out. I'm on second base. I don't even know how I got there. I was standing there. I'm like, how'd I get here? What happened? What the heck do I do? Kid cracked the line drive and I ran back to first base. You know what I mean? It's like a triple play in the wrong direction, little poopy pants to the dugout. You know what I'm saying? And I'm just like, and my friends are running out of the dugout. What I heard my friend say is, you're a loser and you're no good. No idea where those thoughts came from. But as a little kid, that was the voice in my head long before I ever took my first drink. Loser, no good, not worth it, ugly, fat. I remember looking at my mom that day, and she's in the stands clapping. So proud of her kid. And not proud because you got a triple play in the wrong direction, you know what I mean? Proud because it took me an hour to get out of that stupid car to go play that stupid game one more time. And my mom was proud of me that I had enough courage to get out of that car and go try that one more time. But I remember looking at my mom that day saying, if I only had a dad, that had never happened. And I quickly built this belief system that was going to separate me from you, and I had no idea what was going on as a little kid when that happened. But I started to build these old ideas that the big book talks about long before I ever took my first drink. I remember being a little kid, and I would sit up in my bedroom, and I'd have to have the lights on at night. I peed the bed till I was 10. I was absolutely terrified as a little kid. I remember looking out the window, and I'd see a car coming down the hill, and I would think and I'd get excited that was my dad coming home. And the car would keep going, and I knew I wasn't good enough for my dad. And my mom was always gone. My mom put AA before my life. I hated the women in Alcoholics Anonymous as a kid because you guys took my mom from me. I would come to Alcoholics Anonymous, and my mom would light up like a chandelier, and all the women would love my mom. And I'd go home, and I'd get in that car with my mom to drive home, and that car would be absolutely silent. But I remember when I took my first drink of alcohol, I was 9 years old. I was at an AA meeting of all places, and I was 9 years old. It's a Saturday night meeting in Laguna Beach. It happens at the hospital. It's like a speaker discussion meeting. Me and my little friends from AA, we'd rip roar around the meetings, and we'd cause trouble, and go to the conferences and cause trouble. But that night, we were causing trouble at this hospital. There was this guy outside the AA meeting, he had a long trench coat on, he had an eye patch on, he was pissed off, he was resentful, and he was angry, and he'd yell at all the people from AA. And me and my little friends would sit there and laugh, and it was funny, And one day I threw a pebble at him, and he went to go grab me, and I kicked him in the shin, and I took off. And me and my little friends ran through the hospital, and this guy was chasing after us. You little rah, 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 rah. We were like, and ran through the hospital, and ran up the stairs, and we ran out the lobby, out the front door. There was a parking structure across the street. Me and my little friends ran, and we ran up the stairs, and we got between the third and the fourth story of this parking structure, and those kids pulled out a bottle of Jose Cuervo. And I didn't know what alcohol was going to do to me or for me that day, but somewhere I knew inside that if I didn't drink that alcohol, those kids weren't going to like me. And that bottle went around. Those kids took a pull off that bottle. I watched this laughter, and I watched this connection that those kids had, and that bottle got to me, and I was absolutely terrified. The week before the DARE program came to our school, they had this, my whole arm was full of these little red bands. I'm like, just say no, and I was promising my mom, I'm never going to drink, I'm never going to do drugs, and I believed it to the core of my being. But that day when that bottle got to me, I was absolutely terrified because I knew if I didn't drink it, those kids weren't going to like me. So I took a pull off that tequila. I absolutely hated the taste, and I spit it out. And when I was spit it out, I was overcome with a tremendous amount of fear that told me that I was never going to be like the rest of my life. No idea where that thought came from, but that bottle got around and it got back to me. I remember the second time having that bottle, I was excited about it. And the excitement for me was that I had one more opportunity to get those kids to like me. And I put that bottle of tequila down, and that tequila went down and went all the way down to my stomach. And I can tell you the exact effect that alcohol has on this alcoholic body. In that moment, all that fear went away. For the first time in my life, I felt like I connected to those kids. For the first time in my life, I felt like I could communicate. For the first time in my life, I felt a part of. And it's important for me to know exactly what will happen for me if I drink tequila. If I put alcohol in this body, I feel whole. But I also know today that if I put tequila in my body today, what happens is I'm going to not be able to take that second one, and I'm off and running. But I didn't know that at 9 years old. I didn't know that when I put alcohol into this alcoholic body, I had no choice. 11 years old, a kid handed me a joint. I didn't think, hey, going to AA, don't smoke weed. I took a big hit off that joint. Nothing bad happened to me. Authority lie, teachers lie, everyone lies to me. And I drink and use when gangster rap's coming in. Now, I grew up in Orange County, California, not LA, not Compton, Mission Viejo, California. But I wear size 50 Dickies pulled all the way up. I got a 5XL sweatshirt on. I walk with a limp. I drink St. Ides of a brown paper bag. I pour beer in the curb for the dead homies, you know what I mean? And I don't have any dead homies. I'm getting ready for some, you know what I'm saying? And right, because what alcohol does for me is it turns little poopy pants into a gang member. Alcohol gives me power. Alcohol allows me to live with you. One time I went to go get a root canal. It was 9 in the morning. I was 16 years old. I was in the back of the bus where homies sit. I was 140 deep at 16 years old. 140 ounce of St. Ides down by 9 in the morning. I was in the middle of my second 40 ounce of malt liquor. I reached my hand in my pocket. I pulled out 4 hits of LSD. I looked at my friend. I'm like, you want to eat these? He's like, yeah, sure, let's eat them. So we both took 2 hits of acid about an hour before I was sitting in the dentist chair, you know. You know what happens an hour in, right? The tools are bending. I'm like, whoa, you know what I mean? The dentist gives me the nitrous mask, and it was like, bow, wow, wow, you know what I mean? And I went out, and I remember coming to, asking the dentist, can we come back tomorrow to do this, you know? And, right, like more is better, right? Except Mom found a bag of weed at 17. Mom's like, you can't smoke weed in my house. I don't know how you hear it, but I hear I need to hide it better, you know what I mean? Stopping isn't an option. I hear hide it better, so I hide it better for a month. My mom goes to Idaho. She goes to South Dakota. She's flying all over the country to speak, and I'm coming out of a blackout, peeing all over a fish tank, you know what I mean? Steal her truck for the weekend, have a big party at her house, you know, and Mom found a bag of weed one more time. I came home. It was midnight. Top door was locked. Mom had a bag of weed. She said, I told you that if I found this stuff again, I was going to have to kick you out. Now, what I heard that night was that I was kicked out. Since coming to Alcoholics Anonymous, I've learned that I have a hearing problem. Because what Mom said that night, she said, you can either stay here and be sober or go out there on those streets and get loaded, but you need to make a choice. I heard I'm kicked out. So I walked in my bedroom at 17. I packed my backpack. I walked right by my mom, and I looked at her right in the eyes and I said, I'm going to do everything I can to ruin your life. And I watched my mom's heart break right in that moment. And I don't know how you deal with shame and guilt, but this alcoholic arrogance came out. I puffed my chest. I slammed my mom right up against the wall. F you, I hate you. You're never going to see me again. And I left that night at 17 years old, and I'd be homeless from 17 till I got sober at 27. And I didn't call my mom for a year and a half because I was going to leave my mom there to pay for that decision she made for kicking me out. And the first call that my mom got was I was in San Francisco, and I followed the dead, and I had dreadlocks, and we were talking about this story before. I started balding, and my dreadlocks were like hanging on by like 2 little hair strings. I wore a lot of patchouli, you know what I mean? And well, anyways, we won't get into that, but but I called Mom, and my mom was a director of an adolescent treatment center, and she would run family programs and teach parents how to set boundaries in their lives. And I would call my mom and say, Mom, I got in an accident, and I got in an accident. I need to go to the hospital. I'm bleeding out. My mom's like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm in Orange County, you're in San Francisco. I know how to help you. I said, there's this thing called Western Union, Mom. You can go down there and wire me money. And my mom went and wired me $150 just like that. And about a week later, I got another accident, and she went and wired me $150 just like that. And a week later, I got another accident. She wired me another $150. And if you're new, keep your loved ones away from Al-Anon. I want to thank Dustin for hosting me and his mom for getting me the coffee. And she said she was in Al-Anon. I said, oh, perfect. The alcoholic had the Al-Anon get me coffee. You know? But my mom went to Al-Anon, and what happens when they go to Al-Anon, the language changes, right? Because my mom was so scared every time she'd get the call, she'd go wire me the money because she was afraid that I was going to die. She was afraid that she was going to get the call that I bled out. And then she's going to Al-Anon. I call to get the money, and my mom would say something like, no. No? That doesn't make any sense. And I would say things like, well, Mom, if you wouldn't have kicked me out of the house, I wouldn't be in this situation. And I'd hit that guilt button, and my mom would go, wire me the money, just like that. And I'd call, and she'd hang up on me, and I'd call her work collect, and she'd hang up on me, and we'd do this dance, and finally I'd wear her down until she'd go, wire me the money. And she would say no, and I would say things like, well, if I only had a dad, I wouldn't be in this situation. I'd hit that guilt button, and she'd go, wire me the money. And the last year and a half of my drinking and using was downtown LA on Skid Row. The money wasn't coming in from Mom. My last hustle, I'd walk into a gay bar and I'd flirt with enough men to get enough alcohol in my body and hope I'd make it out before I blacked out. And for a straight man, when you come out of those situations, you're filled with remorse, shame, guilt, fear, and loneliness. I was physically and sexually assaulted 13 times. On October 23rd, 2002, when I came to in a bed with a dude, I had no clue who he was, but knew what I did the night before. I was in and out of jail. I was in and out of the Salvation Army program trying to get sober. I'd come to Alcoholics Anonymous identifying as an addict, and they would run you out of AA for being an addict. And I'd come here and I'd say I'm alcoholic and addict, and they would laugh at me and say, put $2 in the basket, you loser. And I'd leave AA because of the judgment in Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't know what alcoholism was. I identified my alcoholism at 16 years old. I didn't know what it was coming to AA. No one ever gave me a big book. No one ever followed me out and told me their story. I went out there and I died one more time. And when I came to on October 23rd, 2002, I was laying in bed with a dude. I had no clue who he was, but knew what I did the night before in order to get what I needed to get. It wasn't any different than the morning before. I came to with the shame and the guilt, the remorse, the fear, knowing that if I went to the liquor store and got a pint of tequila, all those feelings would go away. Knowing that if I can get enough tequila in my body, I could be out and do it again. Because I did it time in and time out, day in and day out. But what happened for me different that morning was I had a spiritual defense that walked right in between me and that first drink. And that spiritual defense said, why don't you call your mom and ask for help? And I went downstairs and I called my mom and I said, Mom, I need help. And my mom said, I can't help you anymore. She said, just stay right where you are and someone from Alcoholics Anonymous will come and get you. She said, if I come and get you, and I'm going to end up killing you. And she hung up on me. And I'm so grateful that my mom didn't come that day because I would have manipulated her for $20 more, and I can guarantee you I wouldn't be standing here today. And my mom tried to call every high-profile old-timer in Alcoholics Anonymous because she wanted the best to help her kid. And none of them answered the phone. But the one guy that answered the phone had about 1 year and 2 months of sobriety. He was on fire for Alcoholics Anonymous, right? He picked up the phone in one ring. He said, where's the kid at? I'll go get him. You know what I mean? You know, he didn't say have the kid call me. If he's willing, he'll call. My willingness was to my mom. That was the only window of opportunity I had. I walked into grace in that moment when I asked for help from my mom. And that guy went and grabbed a new guy. And they came to this motel, and the guy walked in. He's like, my name's Jack. I'm an alcoholic. My whole body's like vibrating. Oh, hi, Jack. You know, so the guy was in a walker. He's like, my name's John. I got 90 days. You know what I mean? And I'm like, yeah, good for you, old man. You know what I mean? Because here I am judging the good folks that came for fun and for free, because if I let you in, you're going to hurt me just like everyone else. One of those other old ideas I had. And I started to separate myself one more time, and that guy, Jack, said, come with me, kid. The grace of God entered my life that day. I got off that bed at that motel, and I walked downstairs, and he said, kid, if you need to throw up, just throw up on the floor. He's like, yeah, it's a 12-step van, you know. And I didn't know what a 12-step van was, but I thought it was kind of weird that I can throw up in his van, you know. And we got in the van, and Jack started telling me a story, losing kids, losing wife, losing businesses, and never had any of those things. I started to shut off to the message. And then he started to talk about every time he goes, well, one time I drank, I went to the hospital. Yeah, this other time I drank and I went to the hospital. Oh, man, this one time I drank and I went to the hospital. Oh, man, this one time I drank and went to the hospital. And we're driving. He goes, hey, John, what happens to you when you drink? John goes, well, I drink and I go to the hospital. And, oh, man, this one time I drank and I went to the hospital. And Jack's, yeah, this one time I drank and went to the hospital. And before he knew it, I ended up at a place called Charlie Street in Costa Mesa, low bottom, engine and detox, 10 days for free. We walk in, he put me on the couch, and Jack goes, hey, Bob, come on over. Meet Pat, new guy. Hey, Bob, what happens to you when you drink? Well, I drink and I go to the hospital. Ha, 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 I drink and I go to the hospital. And Jack, I went this one time, I drank and went to the hospital. Oh, hey, Pete, come on over, meet new guy, Pat, and here comes Pete. What happens to you when you drink? Pete, well, I drink and I go to the hospital. And Jack caught me thinking, because in my head I'm thinking, well, I don't go to the hospital. He goes, Pat, what happens to you when you do drink? Well, I go, well, I don't go to the hospital. He goes, what happens when you do drink? I go, well, I go to jail. He goes, oh, great, tell me. Oh, yeah, it's one time I drank and went to jail. It's one time I drank and went to jail. It's one time I drank and ha, ha, ha. Everyone's like, ha, 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 And then Jack changed the language on me, man. He started to talk about the thinking that preceded his first drink. I never understood why I picked back up. I never understood why I picked back up and prostituted myself one more time. I never wanted to do that. I never wanted to go to jail, but I always ended up there. And I never understood why I made that solemn oath and that promise, why I picked up. He said, Pat, what happens to you? I go, well, I go to jail. He goes, what happens when you're in jail? I go, well, I'm in jail, and H&I comes. I'm really grateful for H&I. Connect. I'm like, I think I'm going to be sober, and I go to the church. I'm going to try to find God. And he goes, well, what happens about an hour before? Well, I go, well, about an hour before I get out of jail, I think, Pat, alcohol's not your problem. Heroin's your problem. And I get out of jail, and I go to the 7-Eleven. I get a 12-pack of beer. I drink the one beer down. Shame, guilt, remorse goes away. In the middle of the second beer, I have a thought. I wonder what they're doing down the street. So I take a walk down the street, I meet a new friend. Before you know it, we're business partners. Before you know it, I'm back in jail. He said, oh, great, what happened that time? I said, well, H&I came, and I just go to H&I and connect with you. I'm going to be sober. I go to church, trying to find God. Everything's great. He goes, well, what happens? I go, about an hour before I get released, I have a conversation with myself. He goes, oh, really, what does that conversation say? I said, well, Pat, alcohol's not your problem. Methamphetamine's your problem. I get out of jail, I get a 12-pack of beer, I drink one beer down, shame, guilt, remorse goes away. In the middle of the second beer, I think, I wonder what they're doing down the street. Take a walk down the street, all of a sudden I meet a new friend. Now we're in a motel for like a week, solving the world's problems. He said, great, what happened that time? I said, well, I went back to jail. Oh, ha, 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 he went back to jail, Pete, ha, 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 ha. What happened that time? Well, I was in jail, and I go, H&I comes, connection, finding God. About an hour before I get out, I start having a conversation with myself. What is that conversation? Oh, well, crack cocaine's your problem, Pat. Alcohol's not the problem. So I get out, and I go get a 12-pack of beer, one beer down, shame, guilt, remorse goes away. In the middle of the second beer, I wonder what they're doing down the street. Take a walk down the street, meet a new friend. Now we're in a motel for like a week, butt naked. He said, what happened that time? I said, I took one step out, someone was out there, I got arrested, butt naked. Ah, ha, 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 this is great, And then he turned it. After I told him enough stories, he said to me, he said, Pat, I'm 42 or 43. He said, if you can concede both propositions, physical and mental, he said, you might be alcoholic. Grateful that he didn't say I was alcoholic. If he would have told me that I was alcoholic, I'd have fought him tooth or nail why I wasn't. Because my whole life, my case was different. I always looked for the differences and separated myself from you. Because every time I came to Alcoholics Anonymous and said I was an addict, I separated myself from you and didn't do what you guys had to tell me. The greatest gift that I've been given in Alcoholics Anonymous is the gift of identification. Because when I can identify and say I'm an alcoholic, I'm one amongst you. And that guy said he's going to be my sponsor. He said, man, when I got here, I was 98 pounds. I hadn't showered in 6 months. I was up for 21 days. I was on Skid Row. I had 2 shoes, only one had a sole. I saw the devil and his troops. They followed me wherever I went. I heard voices in my head. I saw visuals. The only way to get the devil away from me is I didn't even believe in God, but I had this beach cruiser, and I found these 2 sticks, and I twined them like a cross, and I stuck them in the handlebars of my bike, and I cruised around LA like that, you know what I mean? Absolutely normal. Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous says our alcoholic life seems the only normal one. And as it relates to steps 6 and 7, this podium will kill an alcoholic like me. I need to go down to Skid Row and get real present with what happens when I take my first drink. But that guy said, I'm going to be your sponsor. He said, here's a big book, go read it. The second thing I want you to do is I want you to take a shower. I really thought, how do you know, But I went to my big book and I read it. Charlie Brown, Waka Waka, stockbroker, dude, stocking shelves, grocery store, ticket tape, no idea what none of it meant, but I took my first right action. The second thing I did was I went upstairs, I turned the water on to take a shower, because I really wanted that guy to like me. My character defect of people-pleasing saved my life because I wanted him to like me, so I did what he told me to do. I'm a good rule follower for about 3 days. and then you do something wrong, and I know you don't like me, so I don't listen to your rules anymore. You know what I mean? And so I wanted him to like me, so I went upstairs, and I turned the water on, and I fell down on the ground, and I started to cry. It felt like days I was in there. And that guy, Jack, came upstairs in that detox, got down on that dirty floor of that detox. He got on his knees and he put his hand on my shoulder. He said, "It's going to be all right, kid." And he just kind of petted me down there like a little dog or something. And he petted my arm and he petted my arm. And somewhere in that pet, somewhere in that unconditional love, I turned and I looked at him. I was shaking violently on the ground. I turned and looked at him, and he looked into my eyes, and I looked into his eyes, but he was looking right into my spirit. And in that moment, he said, "I love you, kid." The same love that I feel in this moment, in this room, right here, right now, is the same love that I was given to on day one. And somewhere in that moment of love, I trusted that guy that much. And he said, "I want you to stand up, kid." I stood up, and he held onto my arm. He said, "I want you to take off your shirt." I took off my shirt. He said, "I want you to take one step into that water." I took one step in. He guided me all the way underneath the water. I was sitting underneath the water, shaking violently. And the reason I was on the ground crying was because I was so scared to get in that water because the water hurt my skin. And that guy took a washcloth, he took a bar of soap, and that man scrubbed my back. The unconditional love that I walked in when that greeting line welcomed me into this room. Thank you. The excitement for Alcoholics Anonymous and the excitement for life, the enthusiasm, keeps me from wanting to come back each and every day. I'm not a God guy. I'm not like I don't believe in God most days. But I come to Alcoholics Anonymous and I look into the eyes of men and women that should be dead. Into the eyes of men and women that should be locked up in prison for a very long time, and I look right into the eyes of God. And I didn't believe in God until I was 10 and a half years sober. But I believed in you. I came to believe that Alcoholics Anonymous wasn't lying to me. I made a decision to do what you tell me to do. Day one, he had me writing inventory. He said, "Do you believe in God?" I said, "Nope, never will." "Do you believe AA will work?" I said, "Hey, it looks like it's working for you. I'll do it." He said, "You're going to make a decision to do what I tell you to do?" I said, "I'll do it." At once, I started writing inventory. 90 days sober, I was making my first amends to my mom. Because Charlie Street was like a sit down, shut up, do what we do. If not, there's a door, don't waste our time. Do this or die. I'll do it. You know what I mean? But I had to make amends to my mom, and I was living with my mom and at the time, and I had to write this note to my mom: "Mom, I love you and I appreciate you today," and leave her $25. Because I made the amends, and Mom just wanted me to get in the middle of AA. She didn't want me to pay the money back, but the sponsor wanted me to pay the money back. So be careful if you're new what you tell your sponsor. Because it's much better just to get in the middle of AA and help people. When I got sober, I asked my sponsor, I said, "How am I going to fill my mom's shoes?" He said, "Pat," he said, "you don't have to fill your mom's shoes. He just says you have to fill your own." And I'll tell you today that when my mom was on her deathbed, my mom said, "You're doing the right thing. Keep showing up to Alcoholics Anonymous and keep helping people. You filled your own shoes, and I love you." She would just hold my hand and say, "I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you, Patt O, I love you, Patt O, I love you, Patt O." My mom was physically, emotionally abused when she was a kid by an alcoholic father. My mom had no understanding and no way of loving me the way I expected and deserved to be loved. You guys taught my mom how to love. On my mom's deathbed, we're sitting there waiting for her to die. We went to the hospital. She's going to die. All of a sudden, her SATs dropped to 20. It's everyone, she's passing. We all run to the hospital room, and everyone gathers around my mom. And I get on my knees, I hold my mom's hand, and I just start wailing. And the guy's reading her last rites. I don't know what you call him, but whatever you call the guy. He was praying and he was giving her last rites. And all of a sudden, my mom's sats went back up to like 80. She's like, you know. Because I had to make the decision between science and spiritual, right? The doctor said we're going to leave her here. She's going to go in comfort care. And I said, no, Mom wants to be at home to die. He said that she's not going to make it. I said, I believe in God, that God will bring her home. We brought her home. That day was there. My mom just laughed at us. You know what I mean? She stayed alive for two more weeks, but I don't even know how I went there, but I did. Sorry. But I had to write my mom this note. Mom, I love you and I appreciate you today. Leave her $25. Mom, I love you and I appreciate you today. Leave her $25. This would go on. But I got like 2 years sober. I'm like, I'm not doing this. Call sponsor. I'm like, I'm not doing this. Because when you're 2 years sober, you have all the answers. You know what I mean? You start sponsoring yourself. Maybe not in North Dakota, but in Orange County we do. And it's called ego. It's the thing that separates me from you. It goes right along 6 and 7. Because I call sponsor, I'm like, I'm not doing this. He said, well, you don't have to do it if you don't want to. I'm like, good, because I don't want to. He said, but how free do you want to be, Pat? Mom, I love you and I appreciate you today. Leave her the money. 5 years sober, Mom sat me down. She said, I want you to know for the first time in a very long time, I can trust you. She said, I don't want the money anymore. And I'm thinking, good, because I don't want to pay it anymore. She said, but I still want the notes. All the way up until the last day I saw my mom that morning, the day she died. She was gasping. She had lung cancer. Like that. I looked at my mom. I said, Mom, I love you and I appreciate you today. I said, Mom, you're my hero. You're my best friend. You're my spiritual advisor. And most of all, you're the best mom in the entire world. And I had to leave that day to go try to work because I know that that's what my mom wants me to do. My mom's on her deathbed. I had two out-of-state things to go speak, and internally my mom said, I knew inside my mom wants me to go be of service to Alcoholics Anonymous. Because that's what she said when I made the amends. I just want you to get in the middle of AA and help people. And everyone had opinions, and everyone wanted to tell me what was right, and blah, blah, blah. But what happens here in Alcoholics Anonymous at AA boy meets AA girl on AA campus? It's going on in here today, I mean. And you know, in the beginning days, it's like high highs and low lows, like, we're in love, hate you. We're in love, hate you. You know what I mean? Well, that's how me and my son's mom were. We were in love, we hated each other. She got pregnant when we hated each other, but she thought it'd be a good idea to keep the kid, you know what I mean? And, because that'll solve the problem. And I had done the steps. I had made amends. I was 2 years sober. But I knew nothing about character defects. Your character defects, you're selfish and you're self-centered. Duh. Look at drinking. Yeah, absolutely. But I get in a relationship and I don't know how to communicate. I don't know how to share my feelings. Right? No dad. Not in my life. Men authority figures don't even exist. My mom is a very powerful woman in Alcoholics Anonymous, have absolute power over my desires. My mom she passed away, lesbian, right? I couldn't share this stuff before my mom was still alive because she was secret. She never even told me until the day she died, never even told me. It got up to a point where a woman smacked me across the face when I was a kid. I said, it's either her or me. I moved away with a family in Northern California. I came back. She moved in with this woman. They bought a house together. I was at one end of the room. They were at the other. I'm like, this is weird. I chased a woman down the hallway with a knife. The same woman that was taking care of my mom when she died. But it's this big secret, right? I couldn't tell any woman in my life anything. But I didn't know that. I just think I'm afraid. And I get in this relationship with my son's mom, and I can't tell her I don't want to be in this anymore. We hate each other. I got to go. So I go out here in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I flirt with you, and all of a sudden I get a new girlfriend. But I still have this one. This is kind of a problem. Well, and it was her friend. Now I'm sitting in my home group with friend, baby mama, and a couple others. My sponsor said, you're not going to F your way out of AA. You're going to sit in your same seat week in and week out and show the new man that no matter what's going on in your life, sobriety's number one. And I did that. And I made amends, and me and my son's mom are best friends. I mean, best friends. That's a direct result of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I did the inventory, and I said, I'm afraid of being alone. And the sponsor said, well, the underlying fear of that is that you're afraid to die alone. And I'm like, okay. And he said, the underlying fear of that really is that you're afraid there is no God. You know, I'm like, oh, okay. Didn't change the behavior. I didn't want to live like that. I hated myself. I would go home every night, want to put a revolver in my mouth and kill myself. But you go to AA, and they say, get out of self-help others. Get out of self-help others. Well, there's a lot of service to do around here. A lot of sponsees to get. I had like 50 sponsees. I was on like 3 service committees. Busy. Get out of self-help others. That only works for a period of time. And I can tell you that service almost killed me in Alcoholics Anonymous because all of a sudden I became someone in AA. Look at me. Speaking here, speaking there. Chair of this committee, chair of that committee. Look at all these thousands of people I'm helping. The ego separated myself from the spiritual and allowed me to continue in all that behavior. And that didn't just happen with that woman. It happened with the next woman. It happened with the next woman. It happened with the next woman. And I'd get more crazier and more crazier and more crazier. And in 8.5 years of sobriety, it happened one more time, and I could no longer live with the way I was living. But I couldn't go to Alcoholics Anonymous either and say, this is how I'm living. Everyone knew, but I didn't have to ask for help, so I'm going to kill myself. And I'm driving my car 100 miles an hour down the road. It's midnight, and I'd say to myself, I say, when this car gets to 100, there's enough cars coming down. I'm going to barrel my car into oncoming traffic. And my car hit 100. There was enough cars. I'm about to barrel my car in, and I heard a voice in the back seat that said, why don't you call that guy Jonathan from your Tuesday night meeting before you kill yourself? I looked back there. There was no one back there. It was midnight. Dude's much older than me, kind of like Carl. He lives 30 miles north from me. I figured he'd be sleeping. It was midnight. The guy answered in one ring. Pat? And I'm crying. I'm going to kill myself. I can't live this way anymore. First time I got honest. And he said, Pat, I've been waiting for this call for a year. He said, there's a Denny's right where you're at. He said, I want you to meet me at Denny's. I said, all right, when I get there, man, I'll call you. He said, no, I'm going to stay on the phone till you get there. Because he knew I wasn't going to show up. And I pulled into Denny's. He sat down. We ordered some food. I hate Denny's, but we ordered the food anyways to do the right thing, you know. And he has a big book open to page 52, and he starts reading these bedevilments. Having trouble with personal relationships, can control my emotional natures, prey to misery, prey to depression, couldn't seem to be a use to other people. I had 50,000 sponsees. That's an exaggeration, obviously, but right, super busy, but I felt absolutely useless. I was full of fear, and I was alone. And he looked at me and he said, what's your suffering? He said, what you think is a broken relationship? He said, what you're suffering from is untreated alcoholism. And I had this bit of hope. Because I knew that the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous took me from the pit of hell on Skid Row and brought me to a place where I had a love for you, a care for you. And I knew that this guy had an answer. He had a message that had depth and weight. He shared with me his experience of doing the exact same thing. God knew exactly when that voice came, who to call. Right? Because I went to the nooner, and the people in the nooner go, well, you're right where you're supposed to be. Nothing happens in God's world by mistake, champ. You know, I'm thinking, yeah, exactly. That's my God. My God wants me to live a miserable, horrible life. And I went back to the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I had to look at the prejudices that were separating me from God. And I had to separate myself from those, and I had to ask myself deep down within what those big capital words and agnostics really meant to me. I didn't believe in God. I hated God. I was never going to believe in God. And what I came to find out was that God was love. One more time, the love that I feel in this room is God for me. And God for me is that intuitive thought that told me to call that guy Jonathan from your Tuesday night meeting. My whole life I've had intuition. That intuition has always said to me, Pat, go left. I'm going right. Pat, go left. I'm going right. It's been a guide my whole life. And I had to look at the things that were separating me from having a relationship with God. Control, money, what you guys thought of me in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I had to say a prayer, God, please take away these things that separate me from having a better relationship with you. And what happened was those things started being pulled out. And I started to cross them off, those list off, and the last thing on that list was God. And the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous says, in the last analysis, that's where God is found. And in that last analysis, when I had no other options, I made my first decision, and that's third step. I did an inventory with that guy. I did a fifth step with that guy, and he's sitting there writing notes. He wasn't writing a list of character defects. He was writing a list of old ideas. Right? Chapter 5, it says we had to let go of old ideas. The results were nil until we let go absolutely. But what are the old ideas? I never knew about them. It's like a secret in AA or something. But he wrote these old ideas out. And then he stopped writing, and then he was like playing golf in his living room. You know what I mean? I'm thinking, I'm giving this guy important information, man. This guy's... And he hands me this list of old ideas. Male authorities don't exist. Because of my dad, right? You don't exist. Male authority figure, done. Women authority figures have power over my desires. I have to hurt you before you hurt me. I'm looking at this list, and I'm looking at my whole life of how I've acted my whole life to get to that point. And I took an hour with God. And he said, I want you to write a list of new ideas. I want you to get down with God. I want you to write this new list of new ideas. And I prayed, and I started talking to God, and I started writing this list of new ideas. And I got on my knees, and I made a third step decision. My Creator, I'm now willing that you should have all of me, the good and the bad. That means I don't have to decide whether it's good or it's bad. I'm giving it all to you. And it says something to the effect of, leave me with what I need to be of service to you and to my fellows. And when I said that prayer, I started to cry because I knew that my experience from that moment, all the way throughout, good and the bad, the judgment you guys had of me in Alcoholics Anonymous for my behavior, which was, you should have judged me. I knew that all of that experience had helped another alcoholic all the way into that moment. And I was suicidal from 8.5 years when I called that guy until I was 10 years sober. And I don't mean like, hey, I think I'm going to kill myself, champ. I would call my sponsor on the end of the cliff. I'm saying, I'm going to jump. I'm going to kill myself. And he would say, how's that amends to Dad coming along? How's that amends to God coming along? I said, I'm not making it. He said, all right, I'll meet you at the meeting tomorrow. And I would call him the next day, I'm going to kill myself. And he would say to me, he would say, Pat, he'd say, can you please meet me at the meeting before you kill yourself? He's like, I'd like to say goodbye to you before you do it. Okay, I'll meet you there. And I go to the meeting. And I'm going through the steps as I've already identified with you as this whole process. And about a year went by, and I was 30 pounds lighter than I am. I would stay up for 7 days at a time. Absolutely crazy. I'd be at home at 3 in the morning. F you, God. I hate you, God. Even though I found that God in too, that was love and intuition, I would still scream at that old God, F you. Why do I have to live this way anymore? I can't live like this in Alcoholics Anonymous. And about a year in, I realized that if I called my sponsor, he was going to tell me to meet him at the AA meeting. I'm a little slow learner. And he was going to say, how's it amends to God coming along and how's it amends to Dad coming along? I didn't want to hear that. So I was smarter than my sponsor. I pulled over on the 57 bridge, going to jump off the bridge and onto the 5 freeway. And I pulled over and I said a prayer. I said, God, I don't believe in you. I said, but you have 10 seconds because I'm jumping off the bridge. I got out of my car. I closed the door and my phone rang. It was from an unknown number. I don't answer unknown numbers, but I answered that day, and I said, hello. He said, Pat, he's like, my name's Chris. And I met you at an AA meeting last week, and I'm going to drink. I'm leaving AA. Just wanted to tell you. I said, oh, no, Chris, we don't drink one day at a time here in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I started to talk about my thinking that precedes my first drink. On the front of my car, 6 feet away from jumping off the bridge to kill myself. I'm 12-stepping this guy. It was 7 o'clock. I said, Chris, there's a meeting starting in 30 minutes at the Canyon Club. You want to meet me there? He said, yeah, I'll meet you there. I got in my car. I drove 30 miles south to the Canyon Club in Laguna Beach. And I walked in the Canyon Club, and there's Chris. Chris said, Pat, he said, thank you, man. You saved my life. He said, will you be my sponsor? And I'm thinking to myself, 30 minutes ago, I was going to kill myself. I'd love to be your sponsor, Chris. God saved my life through that new guy. God used my character defect to help another alcoholic. That night I went home. I was screaming at God. I was cussing at God one more time. And I felt a hand on my shoulder push me right off the couch. I was in the fetal position on the floor. I'm screaming, F you, God, I hate you, God, I can't do this anymore. And all of a sudden, the words came out of my mouth. And I started to make amends to a man I never met. I don't have a part in that relationship. My mom got pregnant in a blackout. But where had I been selfish, dishonest, frightened, self-seeking? In every area of my life, I used my dad to keep you at an arm's distance. If I only had a dad, I'd know how to be a friend to you. If I only had a dad, I'd know how to be a boyfriend to a woman. If I only had a dad, I'd know how to show up for work. If I only had a dad, I'd know how to be a man amongst men. And I started to make amends to this man I never met. And what happened for me in that moment was the victim was pulled right out of this physical body, and the power of God went deep down within. I got off the floor that day, and I looked the world right in the eye. And the power of love has come out from me from that day to the stand here this day. I haven't had to act out any of that kind of behavior. I've been able to tell every man in my life I love him. I'm able to get honest with another man. I'm able to sit down with any woman in my life and get absolutely vulnerable to the T about my thoughts, my fears, my loves, my cares. All of that today is a direct result. Right? I can't talk about 6 and 7 unless I talk about the rest of the process, because those two are two great steps, but the process of the 12 steps is absolutely powerful and life-changing. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous not prostitute myself one more day for one more hit. And I've been given so much more. I end with this story because I always end with it. Carl's going to get mad because he wants to get to lunch. He told me before, and you can't bag on the guy that has the podium after you, Carl. I love you, brother. And I end with a story. I got to end with my kid. Maybe I'll tell another story about my mom, but we'll see what happens. But I'll tell this. Currently, right now, my mom is, it's not her wife. They never got married. The lady claims it. She's crazy, but I never understood. I'll never understand. It's none of my business. But I thought I made the medical directives for my mom. I thought I was the executor. I call it the executioner, but I've learned it's the executor of the will, and it's been a process to learn the difference. It's kind of like altruistic, you know. I mean, I couldn't really, she went to the hospital, and I thought I made the decisions, and so I called the attorney to get the medical directive, you know, and I get it, and it's this woman, and this woman's crazy. She's well, we won't say that word, bad word, but she's crazy, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe that this one, she's a registered nurse, but she's crazy, you know what I mean? And I'm like, oh my God, and so I get down in prayer, and there's a level of acceptance. I know that my mom wants this to be, so I respect that. Give decision, power, and I just kind of hang back and let it happen. It got crazy and it got ugly, but that's what my mom wanted. And me and her have had gnarly words. I've cleaned that up. I forgive her. I love her. I don't have to like it. I have to accept and forgive. She's going to hospice, and I have to ask my mom, you're going on hospice. Are you sure you want to go there to do it? She said, yes. I said, are you sure that you want to do that? Because you need to know that, like, I'm not going to be able to go visit you, like, without a witness. It's like that. And my mom made the decision that's what she wanted to do, and I had to accept that. And then I get there, and I find out that I'm the executor of the will, and it's made all kinds of things crazy. But I've come to understand that my mom protected me from having me to make that decision to pull the tube. I would not have been able to see that if I was filled with that resentment towards that woman. I'm so grateful that the program of Alcoholics Anonymous has given me a design for living. And now I get to practice the traditions in the relationship, because it's like this little my family is an AA family of these crazy women with a lot of sobriety who love my mom. And it's a lot of drama. Oh, God, it's a lot of drama. But I get to practice the 12 traditions in my family. I am the I almost said it again, the executor, right? I can come in and say, you know what? We're doing what I want. But I don't believe that's going to bring unity in tradition 1 to the family. So I practice the second tradition, and I take a group conscience of what's the best for my mom. And when discussion gets off the primary purpose, which is my mom, I get to bring it back to the primary purpose. And is this an outside issue, which is outside? Is this your personality, or is this the spiritual good of my mom? And I get to separate those two, right? I mean, down to orange balloon, yellow balloon at the memorial, kind of, just like committee work. Right? If you're on the committee, thank you. You understand. You know what I mean? Full-on blows over yellow balloon, orange balloon. Let's throw a red one in there to, like, balance it off, Everyone's happy, you know what I mean? And I get to do that. And I get to, it was a thing that made, and I had to call everyone individually. And I knew already the answer, but I'm going to do the right thing. And it was all personality. And I got to tell these people, this is personality, not principle. What's the principle here? And I get to teach people. I get to be an example of the 12 steps, the 12 traditions in my family and my home. And I know that my mom would be proud. I know my mom would be proud. When I got on the plane, like, my mom has an oxygen tank, so she has to make the flights. I can't make them because she has special requests. So she's like, she's going to make it, and I guess, I didn't even know this in the background, but she called Carl or Judith or someone, and all of a sudden the tickets were bought, and she died, and the tickets, whatever happened to them, and I didn't know, but I was terrified to come here and be with you, because I was supposed to travel with my mom. I was sad. I get to the airport, I'm just sad. I'm like trying to pray and trying to talk to people. They were sleeping. It was way too early for anyone, but it's me and God, and I get on the plane, and there's Carl. Right? God knew what God was doing through the whole process, all the way months and months and months before. I can see the golden thread right through it all. And I walk in, and there's Carl with a big smile on his face. It was just a handshake on the way back, but I knew that I was okay. Thank you. And I get on my aisle seat, and there's a guy on that window seat, and there's an empty seat in the middle, and I'm like, this is kind of weird. I was like the 10th to the last person. No one sat in that middle seat. I knew it was my mom. And I flew all the way to Colorado next to my mom flying with me. And right when I landed, I turned my phone on, and the time was 11:11. You may think coincidence. I'm in touch with a power deep within that knows that's absolutely God. We're doing what God does. I lay over and had a good conversation and good lunch, and we get on the next plane, and I look out the window, and it's like we're above the clouds, and I'm looking out there, and I see this yellowish, goldish dancing in the clouds. And I just get the biggest smile on my face knowing that that's my mom. I started to cry. And I had this deep feeling that says, you're going to be all right, kid. And I get here and I get amongst friends that welcome me. I meet new friends and I'm filled with a tremendous amount of love and gratitude. And I know today that I'm right where I'm supposed to be. Because of my relationship with my son's mom, we have my son 50-50. We've had to stay out of court. We haven't had to fight. Anything goes down the pike, she says, hey, I got to do this. I'm like, I got him. Anything I do, she's got him. She's got him right now. Tomorrow I'll pick him up. Sunday to Wednesday is my day. Well, Tuesday used to be his day with his grandma. To this Tuesday was sad because it was his first week without grandma. But I get to talk about grief and I get to talk about the process of it. And we get to work through it together. But I got to speak in Portland, Oregon, and I came home and I landed and I was frustrated and I was cranky and I was traveling, you know, it is probably delays for 10 hours. And I land and I go pick up my son. His name's Eden, and his name's Eden Gannon Ochoa for you acronym folks. And his initials are Ego if you're trying to figure it out. And only an alcoholic would do that to their kid, you know what I mean? But I go pick him up and I get in the car and he's sitting there and I'm cranky and I'm frustrated. And he goes, Dad, did you remember to pray? No, you want to pray? He's like, yeah, let's pray. So he says a prayer, please take away my dad's anger. He's not nice when he's angry. And we get to the restaurant, we buy food, we go home and we get out of the car. And my son's afraid, he's timid, he's shy. And all of a sudden this girl's walking down the apartment complex and she's punching windows and F you and F this and my boyfriend this and my boyfriend's that. And my son gets timid, he's scared. And I know that I have a spiritual responsibility to keep my son safe, but I also have a spiritual responsibility to help that human being who's suffering. And I look at my son, I say, Eden, go inside and dish out the food. He says, okay. And he goes inside. I say, God, please direct my next action. And that girl came walking right up to me and she's crying and her boyfriend took her phone and she had a knife in her hand. She had cut her arms all up and down and she was bleeding. She said, can I use your phone? I gave her my phone to call her dad. My prayer was answered just like that. I knew exactly what to do. I gave her the phone. She called her dad. I said, God, please direct my next action. I don't know what to do in this situation. Direct my next action. She was on the phone. She said, my dad wants to talk to you. My prayer was answered just like that. I knew exactly what to do. I got on the phone, talked to her dad. And on the other end of the line, this guy, he said, what's the condition of my daughter? I said, your daughter's bleeding. Her arms are bleeding up. She had a knife in her hand. I got the knife out of her hands, but she's bleeding. And this guy started to cry. And he said, I don't know who you are. It's going to take me an hour to get to your house. He said, I don't know who you are, but can you take my daughter inside and take care of her? My prayer was answered just like that. I knew exactly what to do. I took her into my apartment. I walked her into the bathroom. I cleaned off her arms, bandaged up her arms. And I went out to see my son. He had dished out the food. I went out there and he had dished out the food in 3 plates. He said, Dad, you think she wants to eat? I said, I don't know. Why don't you go ask her, dude, you know? My little timid, scared kid walked in. He's like, hi, my name's Eden. And I peeked my head around the corner and he's holding her hand. He said, every time I'm sad and every time I'm hurt, he said, I pray. He said, will you say a prayer with me? And she said, yeah, I'll say a prayer. And they're holding hands and he's praying for her. And I sit back and I just start to cry. And I'm crying and I'm present to the moment, watching my son help another human being through the power of God. And he gets done praying. He says, amen. He said, every time I say amen, he says, I meditate. Will you meditate with me? She said, I guess. I mean, she had nowhere to go. She was stuck, you know what I mean? And he's like, breathe God in, breathe fear out. Breathe God in, breathe fear out. Breathe God in, breathe fear out. And then he says, I'm going to go eat. You know, my dad, he comes over. We sit at the dinner table and we say a prayer like we always do. And we thank God for bringing that girl into our lives. The dad called. He's like, I'm here. My son goes, I want to go out there and meet him. I'm like, okay, dude. He goes walking out, my timid, scared little kid. I'm like, what the heck, you know? Walk outside. Her dad's like 6'10", tattooed head to toe, face tattoos, cholo, orale, you know what I mean? I'm scared, you know what I mean? I'm like, uh-oh, you know what I mean? He's got like 6 homeboys with him, you know what I mean? I'm like, oh, man. And my son walks right up. He goes, hi, my name's Eden. He said, we met your daughter, and he said, I said a prayer with your daughter, and I believe that your daughter's in God's hands. I wanted to ask that little boy to be my sponsor, you know what I'm saying? They took off. We went inside. We thank God for putting in our lives one more time. If you're new here today, I want you to know that Alcoholics Anonymous is a lot more than just not drinking. Alcoholics Anonymous is a process of growing up. And it's my prayer every night when I go to bed that if you're new, you find a sponsor that cares more about your life than the way you feel. I want to thank you one more time for the opportunity to be of service, and I love you all. Thanks. Yeah.